Hi, my name is Mike Galligan. I'm an attorney with Galligan & Manning here in Houston, Texas, and thank you so much for joining me for a discussion of the essential estate planning documents for college-bound students. Now, a little bit of background before we get started. Galligan & Manning is a firm founded in 1997, and since that time, we've offered services to our community related to estate planning, so that's generally going to be wills, trusts, powers of attorney, estate administration, so walking loved ones through situations where a family member has passed away, and now we offer elder law services. We're living longer and longer these days, and we can now offer some guidance about how to deal with the issues that can come up during those extended living periods. Here at Galligan & Manning, we feel that it's important to share useful information with our community to make sure that our clients and the people around us have the necessary information to make important decisions, particularly having to do with estate planning and probate. And so we've started doing seminars where we'll discuss topics related to estate planning and probate and elder law, topics such as the 10 things you can do with your beneficiary designations that can completely wreck your plan and cause terrible misery for the people who are left behind, or how to pick an executor or a trustee, or even just a basic introduction to what elder law is, what it means, and how it can be used to your benefit. You can also check us out on Facebook. We have a weekly, call it a Kevin's Corner, where one of our attorneys here, Kevin Horner, will do a 5 to 10 minute discussion about a topic that would be of interest in this area. And because it's done in the Facebook Live format, you can actually comment, ask questions, and he can respond to you in real time, or we can respond even after the video's been posted. So it's a really neat way for us to reach out to our community and get information out there that people can really use. Now, today is the first of our video seminars. So this is kind of taking those in-person seminars and putting it in a format where people can see it whenever they want. They can take notes at their own pace. They can pause, leave, come back, and do things however they want to do it. Look for more of these. We have a YouTube page that we're going to be using more and more to get these resources out there. Some of it's even going to be recordings of the seminars that we've been offering for mainly just our clients. So that these are very valuable resources, and really they explore topics that you wouldn't be able to get into unless you sat in an attorney's office and had them go through these things, and might potentially be paying for those services. So these are all free, but we offer them because we think it's important to keep everybody around us informed as to ways that they can help themselves and make things easier for their loved ones, but also give themselves peace of mind. So whenever you get a chance, and I'm going to put this up on the screen here in just a second, if you can head on over to our website, galliganandmanning.com, it's all one word, or go to our Facebook page and give us a like there. You'll be kept up to date on all of our events, so whether they be in-person seminars or videos posted by Kevin or videos posted to our YouTube page, you'll get a sense of when all those are happening and if they can be of use to you. So without further ado, let's get into our main topic here, the essential documents for college-bound students. And the whole reason that we decided to do this seminar was because of a number of clients had run into what I call a big surprise. They found that when they were enrolling their child in college, maybe they were already 18 or maybe they were about to turn 18, they discovered that upon reaching age 18, they were suddenly cut off from all sorts of information about their child, the child that had grown up in their household, the child who they'd always had access to their healthcare and financial information before. Suddenly, they're treated as a complete stranger. And I remember one client who was in here not too long ago who said it's almost malpractice on the part of a pediatrician to not let the parents know that this is something that's on its way. And that really does make a degree of sense, because college is one of those times where you're people are receiving a whole lot more freedom, a whole lot more responsibility, and a completely different situation than they've ever faced before. For many, this is the first time somebody has been away from home. So they're having to make their own decisions. Hopefully they're good ones. But in any event, there's a whole new landscape out there for these children to experience. Not all of it is positive, and so we want to make sure that parents are in the best position possible to give guidance or get information that they need. So let's take a little look at that landscape here. You know, for a lot of students, and this is kind of a running joke that, you know, there's something called the freshman 15. So, you know, you go to school for the first time and you can go to the dining hall whenever you want and you can eat whatever you want. And so, you know, the joke is that generally a freshman will leave their first year of college having gained 15 pounds. I can tell you that wasn't my experience in college. I actually probably lost about 15 pounds, but that's not necessarily a good thing. Either way, because students are going out on their own for the first time, they're not necessarily getting the same type of guidance that they would have gotten at home. They're not being provided meals. They're having to make these decisions themselves. And so you'll see that there are studies that almost 80% of freshmen don't, you know, get the exercise that they're supposed to get, and their dietary habits deteriorate once they are in the college environment. And that can be because of stress, and they only have limited time to get these meals. It could be because this is the first time they've had access to a lot of different things, and they are, you know, taking advantage of that for the first time. But this has an impact on the child's health. It has an impact on their not just their college career, but maybe going well beyond that. And so it's just one of those things that we have to be mindful of, and it's one of the perils that's floating around out there for our college-age children. You know, the one that people think about most often is alcohol and the effects that it can have. Now, you know, binge drinking, these are all things that we've heard about for a long time. You know, that we should all be concerned that these things are occurring. And it does happen. The rates that this occurs on college campuses in particular are very high. You know, when it comes to alcohol poisoning, I actually had an experience with this the first couple of weeks that I was in college. You know, we'd moved into our dormitory and we were getting to know all the people on our hallway. And there was an evening I was out with some of my newfound friends. We were walking around campus. We hadn't gotten up to anything in particular, but we found another one of our hallmates on a bench closest to the dormitory, but all alone and clearly in some distress. And so it actually fell on us to take her into the hospital, and she ended up having, you know, some procedures having to be done. And it was because she hadn't really been exposed to alcohol as a person growing up, and she, you know, went after it all at once. So that was a very scary thing for us to see, and I'm sure that, you know, her parents and her family trying to get information about that. That's fairly alarming when you might hear that there's something going on. You can't actually get the information that you need to reassure yourselves that everything's going to be okay, or to make the decisions that are necessary to make sure she's getting the best care possible. You know, people who are aged 12 to 20, I found this statistic remarkable, drink 11% of all alcohol consumed in the United States. Now, 12 to 20, you're not yet of legal drinking age. And then more than 90% of this alcohol is consumed in a binge format. So it's being consumed all at once. That leads to greater likelihood of deleterious effects on the body. And generally, you know, underage drinkers will consume more than folks who are of age. But the alcohol poisoning and you know, the immediate effects on the body, which can be very, very serious, that's not the only thing that can be linked to alcohol use in college. Injuries. People become clumsier. You have a lot more falls, sprains, cuts. Those types of injuries can be linked back to that. We all know about the dangers of drunk driving, but assaults and partner and dating violence, these are some of the things that may not be as well documented. Almost 50% of incidents having to do with assault were related to alcohol in the context of college communities. So again, it may not be your student who is involved in drinking, even though they're underage, or maybe even if they are of age. But the effects of people around them drinking can still be felt. In 2013, there were almost 120,000 emergency room visits due to alcohol use. And again, this is linking back to injuries or linking back to the actual drinking itself causing the problem. And alcohol, we'll see later on, has effects on a wider range of areas. So it can affect a student's ability to sleep at night and make sure that they're getting enough rest. But then it can also have longer term effects. Now, this has become, it seems, a little bit more common of late. This is using prescription drugs for purposes that they weren't prescribed. And they really break down to mostly three categories. For stimulants, so we're talking about Ritalin and Adderall. And again, this is for people who have not been prescribed these drugs. Generally speaking, they're going to be used as performance enhancers to hopefully give them the ability to focus for longer periods of time, get more work done when there may be a time crunch. And it's remarkable that for people between 18 and 22 years of age, if they are in college, they are twice as likely to use these substances without a prescription than people who are outside of college. So you can see a clear link between people trying to succeed. They're on their own for the first time. They don't want to fail, so they're going to turn to the solutions that may be available to them to help out. Unfortunately, it can lead to some health complications, particularly when it's not being prescribed by a doctor. Somebody's not overseeing how they're actually taking it. So it's one of those things to be aware of. On the other side of the coin, you have sedatives. And again, the use of this in college is fairly elevated, and this can generally be traced back to the stresses of being away from home for the first time, social pressures, the workload that they may be dealing with in college. And so these are generally going to be your Ambiens, your Ativans, Xanax, those types of medications. And then we see in the news a whole lot the idea of the opioid epidemic. These generally are going to be used for chronic pain management, but when they're being used without a prescription, really it's more to feel good. It's not so much to relieve stress or to enhance performance. It's going to be something that is meant to, again, bring some kind of escape. And these can have very dangerous effects on the body. With tobacco, generally speaking, it's at this age where people start using tobacco. 99% of people who had their first cigarette had it by the age of 26. Generally speaking, when we're talking about people being college age, we're talking about 17 to maybe 24, 25. Not everybody goes through in 4 years. And then you may have graduate studies. So this is really the prime area where smoking can begin. And then 1/3 of college-age students have used tobacco products in some way. So again, it's fairly widespread. Now, illegal drugs are definitely present on college campuses, and increasingly, and not even increasingly, marijuana has been prevalent for a long time. Now, with more legalization, whether or not it's illegal, that kind of is up in the air. It depends on the age restrictions on its use. But it's used by a wide number of kids. The quote-unquote party drugs, so MDMA and ecstasy, there are plenty of dangers to go along with their use, but one of the main dangers are that people may not know what exactly they're taking, so they don't know what effects they're going to have. They don't know what to expect, and so that can lead to some dangerous situations. And I was surprised when I was going through these statistics that cocaine was one of the drugs that popped up. I mean, I think a lot of people think of this as a drug mostly of the past, but it's still having a huge effect even into the 2010s. You can see that almost 40% of all emergency room visits having to do with illicit drugs had to do with cocaine. And almost 36% of students have been offered it at some point. That's not to say that they used it, but it is out there. It's something to be aware of. When it comes to the college environment, a lot of times we think about dormitories, which are generally, very tight quarters. People are sharing resources like bathrooms and water. So this is something of a prime area for infectious diseases to spread. And the scariest one out there is this meningococcal meningitis and septicemia. It moves incredibly fast. It's incredibly dangerous. And this is one of the reasons why, as we'll look later on in this presentation, being able to get access to information quickly is very, very important. There are generally only about 100 to 125 cases of this per year. That doesn't make it any less disturbing and scary. And because of the college setting, it is capable of moving very quickly through college populations. Then you run into your standard flu. The strains of that change every year. So if you're immunized a year before, it may not be good for the flu that's going around this season. And generally speaking, college students are not always the best about getting immunized. Oh, and back to the meningococcal diseases. Generally, a vaccine is going to be required before a child can attend college because they are trying to prevent the spread and instances of this. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there won't be people who haven't received the vaccine in attendance, or that it's absolutely foolproof. So this is still something to be aware of as part of the landscape. Again, because of nutritional behaviors, you may see an uptick in foodborne illnesses and gastrointestinal issues. We hear a lot about Norwalk or the cruise ship viruses. Again, it's that same story where you've got a whole bunch of people in a confined space sharing a lot of the same resources, so it's easy for those types of things to spread. This isn't as dangerous as the things at the top of the list, but it can still affect academic performance. It can still knock somebody out of commission for an extended period of time, and dehydration does come along with this. So we want to make sure that we know that our students are being well taken care of. Mono is one of those illnesses that is pretty highly associated with college, and that one we know can have very, very long effects, months-long effects, from exhaustion and inability to really function in that high-level academics setting. Strep is often thought of as kind of a childhood disease, but again, any place where it's easy to spread, these things like this are going to take hold. And then sexually transmitted diseases. Now, there are a number of those that first come to mind. The CDC has taken particular care to identify HPV as the thing that they really want to prevent because of its link to cancers down the road. So there are vaccines that are now available for this, and those vaccines can be administered to children very young, even before college age, but they particularly recommend it for people through the ages of 26 and 21, just to make sure that, again, something that they acquire in college or something that they acquire as a young adult does not cause further problems for them down the road. So those are some of the things that are outside of people's control. You can't always control whether or not you fall ill, but here's another factor that has less to do with outside forces and more to do with the actual behaviors of college students. 50% of college students exhibit daytime sleepiness because they're not getting enough rest. And 70% of college students overall simply do not sleep enough on a nightly basis. And there are a number of reasons for that. That could be because they're at partying. It could be because they're studiously working on what they're supposed to be working. But of course, with the workload of a full college curriculum, there's not always enough hours in the day, or it may feel that way, to get everything done. Technology use has become particularly prevalent and is one of the leading causes of sleep deprivation. It's so easy to lose track of time if you're scrolling through your phone or on a video game system or even just watching television, and that can hamper your sleep rhythms in a way where you simply will not get sufficient rest. Alcohol, again, alcohol is both a stimulant and a depressant, so part of its effects can inhibit the ability of students to get sufficient rest. And energy drinks and caffeine, these are things effectively designed to keep you alert and awake, and so their use can also have negative effects. Generally speaking, sleep deprivation, what you'll see is reduced academic performance, but then it also can affect your mental well-being. It's linked to depression, and it also makes you more vulnerable to some of those infectious diseases that we were talking about before. It's generally speaking, it's one of the easiest things that we can do to keep ourselves healthy is to get sufficient sleep. And so, you see here that that study in the Journal of Youth and Adolescence, there's some really scary things that sleep is linked to, or lack of sleep can be linked to. And again, even without sleep deprivation, college is still a stressful environment. You have people being away from home for the first time, you've got social pressures, you've got academic pressures, and so it's not entirely a surprise that more than a third of first-year college students struggle with some sort of mental health issue. And depression is the leading issue that they're talking about. And again, unfortunately, suicide does tend to be one of the leading causes of death among college-age individuals. So there's a whole lot of perils out there. There are a whole. When we list them all out together, it sounds like it's a very, very scary place. It doesn't have to be, and it's not that way for everybody, but it's always important to be aware of some of these issues that may face our children as they go away from home for the first time. And so the Center for Disease Control has put out a fact sheet. It's online, so it's interactive. You can find it at cdc.gov/family/college, and it will list out the different risky activities, the different things to be concerned about, how to mitigate some of those risks, things to think about before engaging in some of those activities. And so it can be a useful thing both for parents to review so that they're aware of what they're looking at, but also for the students themselves to know that there are some resources out there for them to deal with the perils that they may encounter as they go away to college. So now that we've listed out all these horrible things, what are some ways that parents can ensure that not only they have the information that they want, but also that there are people in the position to make sure their children are taken care of? And we've identified really 4 essential documents that everybody should consider having prepared before going off to college. The first one's the HIPAA authorization. Second, we have medical power of attorney. Third is a financial power of attorney that has a different name, and we'll get into that when we start talking about it. And then there's the FERPA authorization that has more to do with grades and academic records. But let's start off with the HIPAA authorization. And for my thinking, this is the main document that you absolutely, I consider it somewhat beyond essential. This is the one that everybody should get. HIPAA is the privacy law that prevents a healthcare provider from sharing your healthcare information with unauthorized third parties. It's one of the reasons why a stranger can't just walk in off the street and ask for your hospital records. Now, I think the alarming thing is that when parents ask for these types of records about their children who are over the age of 18, suddenly they are treated as that type of stranger. And that's what this is designed to prevent. A HIPAA authorization is a document that can be signed by a person that says, these individuals are authorized people to receive this type of healthcare information about me. Now, one thing that it doesn't do is authorize decision makers. It would still be the person signing it who has the ability to make all of their own healthcare decisions. But in the event that somebody is away at college and maybe you know that something has happened, but you don't know for sure, and you call up the local hospital, you want to be sure that you are a person that the hospital will discuss this information with. So the HIPAA authorization, I think, is paramount in its importance. After that, we've got the medical power of attorney. So the medical power of attorney, it works hand in hand with that HIPAA authorization, because what it does, it allows a person designated by the person signing the power of attorney to make healthcare decisions on behalf of that person in the event they can't make those decisions themselves. Now, one of the kind of comforting things about this document is that it only goes into effect once the person who signed it is unable to make their medical preferences known to their doctors. So as long as you are still conscious and able and willing to do it, you get to call your own shots as far as your medical care is concerned. But in the event you can't do it, that's why we've got the medical power of attorney in place to make sure that there's a list of people who are able to do it, and that there are going to be people that you trust to make those types of healthcare decisions. It's generally a good idea to only have one person named on these to act at a time. So we don't generally want two people acting together, because healthcare providers, they don't want to hear multiple people talking to them, giving them conflicting directions as far as what to do. And if they're ever faced with that situation, they would ask one of those people to resign. Once somebody is resigned as an agent, they're basically out of the loop unless there's some other provision built into the medical power of attorney to allow them to be a decision maker sometime down the road. That's not what we want. So generally speaking, you want to name the primary person you want making these types of decisions if you can't do it yourself, followed by the next person, followed by the next person, followed by the next person. In the absence of the medical power of attorney, I like these documents because they allow me as somebody signing to control my healthcare outcomes by putting trusted people in place to make those decisions. I don't want that left up to chance, and generally speaking, your students probably don't want that either. So that's been a discussion of the medical side of things. That puts people in the position to A, get information, and B, make decisions as necessary. On the financial side of things, we can also give you a little bit of help there as well. A financial power of attorney is a little bit more flexible than the medical power of attorney, in that the person who is signing it can choose when it goes into effect. And they can say, oh, this goes into effect as soon as I sign it, or they can say, no, I only want this to go into effect if I can't make these decisions myself. If a doctor says this person cannot make their own healthcare decision or make their own financial decisions. We call it a statutory durable power of attorney because the form for it is taken out of the laws having to do with powers of attorney. And we call it durable because it's not revoked if a person subsequently becomes incapacitated. In fact, that's the exact time when we do want that to be in effect. And in the context of somebody going off to college, this can allow mail to be taken care of, administrative things back home to be done so that they don't have to be forwarded off to a student living in a dorm or living in off-campus housing. It allows for another set of hands to do the same types of things that the student would have been able to do in the first place. And then FERPA is a law that it's the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It's got kind of a funny name when you say it in its acronym form. But it prevents sharing of academic records with unauthorized individuals. Now, there's a whole bunch of exceptions to this, and so for certain types of studies, academic information can be shared. When it comes to behavioral or conduct issues, some of that information can be shared. But generally speaking, as a parent, you're not necessarily entitled to receive transcripts or academic reports having to do with your student, unless that your student has signed an authorization saying, yes, I authorize my parents to see this. Generally speaking, those educational records are going to be those that are directly related to the student. They're managed by the school or the institution, and it's going to be grades, transcripts, discipline records, class schedules, those types of things. Now, this is case-by-case specific. Not every student wants to give their parents the ability to get their academic information. Not every parent wants to insist that they receive that information. But this is, if you don't know going in that this is going to be an obstacle, and the student agrees that this is something that they want their parents to be able to have access to, then it's at least something to consider. It's at least something to consider to make sure that there's as much transparency as the student wishes. And that's what we get to next. Who is the client? Who would we do this work on behalf of? Because this is part of what we do as estate planning attorneys. We very often work with students who are going off to college to make sure that they have the necessary paperwork in place so that they are comfortable that people are in place to make decisions on their behalf if they can't do it themselves, or if they want an extra set of hands to do it for them. It's important to remember, even if you contact us as a parent, our client is the student. It's whoever we're preparing these types of documents for, and so it's important that we have a chance to sit down with them, to talk to them, figure out what considerations they have, what concerns they may have, and just, again, make sure that they understand the pros and cons of signing particular documents, of not signing them, and so ultimately it becomes their decision whether or not these documents are signed. Now, that doesn't mean you can't sit down and have a candid conversation with your students to make sure they understand where you're coming from and that you have an understanding of where they're coming from as far as the flow of information goes. So just keep in mind, we don't work on behalf of the parents in this situation. We'd be working on behalf of the students. So what the student ends up doing may be different from the preferences of a parent. But regardless, just having the conversation and just making sure that both parents and students are aware of the realities of the flow of information, the realities of the college landscape, I think that's important. So even having the conversation is a step further than most families have been able to take. So I know that we've talked a lot about things that are kind of scary, and we've given some solutions, but I really believe that this is a very important topic for families to address with each other. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me go on about it. And again, please feel free to visit us at galliganandmanning.com or like us on Facebook. We'll keep you up to date on all the extra information that may be coming out with regard to other topics. We try to keep that as updated as possible. Thank you so much, and if you need any help in this regard, we look forward to hearing from you. Our number is 713-522-9220, or just check out our website, galliganandmanning.com. Thank you so much, and good luck in college.